live in a world where we get constantly bombarded with perspectives, teachings and points of view. What to believe, who to listen to. Here, I will provide some alternative perspectives. Here, you are encouraged to check for yourself, form your own informed opinions and make up your own mind. From the spiritual to the mundane, join me every week as I dive into some of the biggest and smallest issues facing us all. Hello and welcome to the vodcast of Laird Joy. So if there's one thing that's been in the news a lot over the last few years, it's conspiracy theories. Not directly, but it's just that there's so much news over the last few years that have resulted in conspiracy theories manifesting around them, should we say. And so the topic of conspiracy theories is something that we've just been, has just been around over the last few years. Some people believing them, some people hating those who believe them, people who believe them hating those who don't. And I did a podcast recently about polarity and things like that a few months ago, and it's worth having a look at that, because it's something we need to address is the polarity in the world, the fact that everybody is always disagreeing with each other now, it seems to the point where they're willing to hate each other for it. Families are becoming estranged from each other, friends are losing friends and all sorts of things, and it's really not worth it. We're allowed to have an opinion without hating each other, and we need to really get back to having a little bit more of an open mind, being a little bit less closed-minded about different topics, and being willing to at least acknowledge that another person can disagree with this, without it coming to verbal blows. So this time I thought I'd have a look at the term conspiracy theory itself, without talking too much about the conspiracies. So, unlike some people who think that it originates with the CIA, dismissing those who didn't agree with the official narrative regarding the death of JFK, in that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, or didn't, as a conspiracy theory goes. Actually, the term dates back to I think it might be the late 1800s, early 1900s. Posh snobs and fancy wigs talking at royal courts and having all the gossip and stuff like that between each other, and talking about the political gossip, the political machinations of each other, or of others, obviously. And that was the conspiracy theories of the time, and the conspiracy theorists of the time. So that's really where it originated. I suppose you could say it was co-opted, perhaps, by the CIA in order to dismiss those who disagreed with the official narrative. And so that's a very brief origin of it. And ever since then, of course, it's been very handy for officialdom to use the term and similar terms to dismiss anyone who disagrees with official narratives. That doesn't necessarily mean that those narratives are true or false. I'm not suggesting, that everything that, the government tell you is a lie. I'm not suggesting, that everything mainstream media tell you is a lie. If you look at some of my social media, you'll find out what I really think about some of that. I do kind of bash officialdom quite a lot in my posts here or there. That's certainly true. That doesn't mean that I think everything they say is untrue. What I think it happens most of the time is that it is context managed. That there is a narrative behind almost everything that is in the news and almost everything that officialdom, that politicians tell you, because they have their filter mechanisms, like every political party does, every newspaper with a political slant does. Every publication does, every magazine does, and also all the main news channels, even the ones that are supposed to be impartial really aren't, especially nowadays with all the kind of woke culture going on, and all that infiltration into news channels and the establishment. So there's no such thing as impartial anymore. So there's always going to be a narrative. That doesn't mean that that they're always lying for the sake of lying, or that they're trying to be untruthful. They probably believe that they're being truthful. It's just that they're operating through their own filter mechanisms. So, but, whether that, whether that's a falsehood or not is for you to decide when you read an article or watch something on the news. And it's up to you to do your own, research. Despite what they said a couple of years ago, and one or two politicians saying don't do your own research. Actually, it's a thing that you should do most of all. But try to don't look at the craziest websites out there. Look at mainstream sources, but also look at non-mainstream sources and look at non-mainstream news channels, and make up your own mind once you have a breadth of information, as opposed to channeling your focus, only at one area, because that way you're literally asking to be brainwashed. That's what I think about that. But the actual topic of conspiracy theories doesn't really cover, strictly speaking, what's in the news. It's just that what's in the news and what they relate to you will be an official narrative, and that official narrative will very often, if not mostly, contradict what a conspiracy theory is actually trying to tell you. So is it true or isn't it? That's a big question, isn't it? Well, it depends on which one, doesn't it? Now, there has been one or two that have come true, and if I just have I'm going to have just a quick look at something, because I'm trying to remember now. And I can't remember where enough is it. Conspiracies, some that have, there have been some that have come true. There's so many different ones. I'm having a glance at some notes that I've got on conspiracies here. There's so many different ones, and I'll mention one or two that are true. Okay, Operation Paperclip. So yes, the United States did, after the end of World War II, import a lot of Nazis into the United States and give them top jobs in certain industries, including the pharmaceutical industry and NASA. So that's one that is definitely true. This is something you can check and find out for yourself. Okay. Is there any other that I actually want to mention? Really, I want you to find out for yourself. There's one, and the Secret Service in the United States and the United Kingdom and other Western nations are all spying on their own citizens. And this is something that it may not have been literally an actual conspiracy theory. Technically, I suppose, according to the strictest definition of the term, but it was something a lot of people said that was rubbished as a conspiracy theory, and it was something that was rubbished by the mainstream media as, don't talk a lot of rubbish. Of course, we're not all being spied on. We can trust our government. And then we discovered, after Edward Snowden's revelations about the NSA's Prism project, and of course, GCHQ in the UK have their own equivalent of Prism, which is called Tempora. And so, just to give you a little extra snippet about Tempora, it is alleged, I should say, that GCHQ sent divers just outside UK waters, and they went down and they tapped all the fibre optic cables. So that effectively, GCHQ can, because all the information, obviously, that you look for on the internet when you're in the UK is going to end up going through those cables at some point before it reaches you. And so everything that goes through those cables, GCHQ can therefore see and read the metadata on. So this is a little snippet where a lot of people think that all this is just America, and it's not. The British guys in the British Secret Service are up to their eyeballs in just as much conspiracy as the US is. They're hand in hand. Where do you think the term special relationship comes from? It doesn't come from us all being buddy, because we are all buddy, aren't we? I love my brother-in-law. He's American, and I've got at least as much family living and working in the United States right now as I do in the UK, and I love them all. So this is we are very, very good friends, the American people and the British people, and have been for so long now. But the term special relationship doesn't come from that. That comes from cooperation between the British and American Secret Service during the Second World War, which is one of the things that would have helped win the war. So we should be glad it happened. So it's not a bad thing that special relationship happened. It's a very good thing, because it helped win the war. But that grew arms and legs slowly but surely over the decades, and what started off, this is my interpretation, so you have to take me with a pinch of salt, but go and check for yourself. But my interpretation goes something like this. The special relationship that developed between the UK and the US during the Second World War flowered and manifested over many years and decades, and became ultimately something that involved more nations. Initially, it involved the Anglosphere, as opposed to just the UK and the USA. And that was when it became known as Five Eyes. And that was shared intelligence between Canada, the USA, New Zealand, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Now, Five Eyes was a success, and everybody knew about it and knows about it, but very few people know that also grew arms and legs and became Nine Eyes. And Nine Eyes included, I believe, Japan and a few of the European nations, the major European nations, including France and a couple of others. Now, that flowered and, generated more arms and legs over time and became 14 Eyes, which includes Germany and a few more European nations. So now what started off as a special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom in the Second World War became an intelligence sharing agreement between 14 nations, which includes the Anglosphere plus several European nations and Japan. Now imagine if they're all sharing all that information that they've got on their own citizens with each other. And this is where the concern lies. It's not the intelligence that they should be gathering that is concerning to me. I'm happy and delighted that there is so much intelligence cooperation between all these countries that provides us all with security. It was successful between the UK and the USA during the Second World War, and why shouldn't it be successful in keeping the world safe in 2023 and beyond? Now with 14 nations and more, perhaps, instead of just 2 or 5 or 9. The difficulty arises when information manifests regarding projects like USA's and Prism and the UK's Tempora, because that's those nations deliberately spying on their own citizens by finding ways to circumvent privacy laws within their own nations. And so there are strong suspicions, and I can't prove it, so I'm not going to say it's fact, but I'm going to say that there are theories suggesting that one of the ways that some of these nations circumvent privacy laws is by sharing information with each other. I mean, we already know that both countries are willing to spy on their own citizens. So why wouldn't they find ways to circumvent any privacy laws that exist in their own nations and do it anyway? Or why wouldn't they just break the law and do it anyway and expect it, if anyone finds out, they can't do anything about it? And, they can just ridicule as conspiracy theories. So they can ridicule me as a conspiracy theorist spreading a horrible conspiracy theory if they watch and listen to this podcast and just say I'm talking a whole load of SHYTE while just carrying on doing it anyway. And that's, part of the reason why more and more and more people are believing conspiracy theories, whether they're true or not, And another big part of it is, as I've mentioned, some of the stuff that's happened over the past couple of years. If you look around my website, johnzorko.com, you'll see lots of helpful posts in dealing with, stuff that might be going on in your life, self-improvement, information and things like that, which I hope is helpful for you. But there's also odd posts here or there which mentions, some of this kind of information and suggests different perspectives. And it's up to you to make up your own mind. Tell me I'm talking a whole load of rubbish if you like. But these things I'm talking about is absolutely true, as revealed by Edward Snowden. And of course, WikiLeaks has come out with an awful lot of stuff as well, which is, why their founder is rotting in Belmarsh right now, waiting for extradition to the United States. Because the most powerful countries in the world don't take too kindly when spying doesn't go their way. They only like it when they're getting a benefit, not when they're paying the price of it. So that's why a lot of people are believing in conspiracy theories, because there's so much of it that's in your face that's actually true. But there's also a lot that's rubbish. There's a lot more out there that's actually rubbish. And there's a lot more out there that there's absolutely no real evidence for that a lot of people believe. And they believe it on the back of the ones that are true, don't they, to a certain extent. I mean, I suppose it's a little bit like that kind of, talk about rabbit holes. You deep dive down that rabbit hole and you see about information about something, you dig it, and you start believing some of it. And before you know where you are, you believe everything you hear. And so you've got so remember the polarity I'm talking about. Sometimes you've got this group of people on one side that believe everything, not necessarily everything, but believe most of what they see in the news, and believe the government narratives, believe the official narratives, believe what the BBC tell them or CNN and what have you, right? And you've got people on the other hand, that don't believe any of it. Just as soon as the BBC say it, it must be a lie. As soon as a government official says it, it must be a lie. Somewhere in between is the truth. And that's why we have to resolve the issue of polarity, where everybody's fighting each other and hating on each other just because they disagree. Because somewhere in between is the truth. But we can only find which ones are true and which ones are rubbish if we actually start talking to each other and listening to each other and looking with an open mind at information, instead of automatically being dismissive to anything that doesn't fall within, that box that we've put ourselves in. So some conspiracies are true and some aren't. And I mentioned a couple that are true. Let me see. Is there any others that I want to mention? I mean, there's okay. I'll mention asbestos was once considered a safe product, and anyone who thought that it wasn't was considered crazy. Also, tobacco was considered a safe product. There were adverts about tobacco when it first, and there was so many different adverts where people were smoking and talking about it being healthy and stuff like that. You can look into it for yourself and you find. Now, these aren't things that are, officially classed as conspiracy theories, really. These are just things where established narratives of the time turned out to be completely false in the long run, and where it was further shown in the long run that the people who were espousing those narratives that it was safe were lying. That they did know that it was unsafe, but they wanted to make money, and so they flogged it anyway. And so, so the conspiracy existed. It's just that there wasn't an official conspiracy theory around it. So what about the Illuminati / Cabal thing? I can't, I'll finish on this one just for fun. The Illuminati / Cabal ideas generally suggests that there is a bunch of elite and a variety of different, theories around this. And so I'll just generalize a little bit. All right. So the general idea is that there's a bunch of elites in the world, like the 1% of the 1%. And these people have got a big plan, and they want to reduce the population down to 500 million. And some of the events over the last couple of years has been because of that and engineered because of that. Okay, as an example. And a lot of the events in the world over the last several decades have been engineered because of that. You know, and some of the figures that have been very prominent in the news supporting certain medical procedures are all part of that, minions of that. You know, so you have this cabal, this 1% of the 1% who are, and part of the reason for this, I'll give you an example of it. There's these Georgia Guidestones in the United States. What would happen if the world came to an end? You know, not necessarily, you know, but, you know, what would happen if a massive catastrophe, the proverbial SHYTE, hit the fan? It was, whether it's a nuclear holocaust, whether it's a massive pandemic, whether it's something else, whatever it is, the proverbials hit the fan, and, you know, society's broken down, the structures of society is broken down, law and order is broken down, there's no more control, the world's in mayhem. What do we do? How do we advise the world? Is there something that we can do? And of course, the Georgia Guidestones manifested out of that as advice for a new world, for a new world order, in the event of a major catastrophe. Okay? And one of the items on this is to manage a world population at or below 500 million. And so this is, at least in part, where the concept comes from, that these elites, this 1% of the 1%, want to reduce the population to a manageable level so that we can just all be slaves. But there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that it actually represents a plan in action right now. You know, so you have to be willing to subscribe to some of the worst of the conspiracy theories that are out there, some of these conspiracy theories that seems like, you know, that are furthest down the rabbit hole, before you believe that one, really, because there isn't actually solid evidence that proves that that is a plan in action. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share far and wide so others can benefit too, and download the podcast audio so you can listen again whenever you like, wherever you like. You can also subscribe to my channel, view and comment on all vodcast episodes by visiting lairdjohn.com. Thanks for listening to the vodcast of Laird John. I've been your host, John McVey.